Here are 10 common beginner mistakes that you want to avoid when doing plumbing yourself. Starting with number 1, not installing drill plates or shield plates when passing pipes in a wall. I can't stress the importance of taking the time needed on the job to protect any pipes, whether it's a pressured line or just a drain line. They must absolutely be protected against drywallers or finishers from installing their drywall, baseboards, or anything that's screwed into the wall afterwards. Think about it this way. A 1 or 2 hour job of installing these could save you months of headaches with insurance claims, and that's not even counting the costs of it all. These protection plates cost around 50 cents each, and they could be bought at your local hardware store in the electricity department, or you could just use the link in the description box below. Number 2 is not holding your fitting and pipe together after they've been cemented. Plastic fittings have a tendency to pull back from each other, which is due to them having an interference fit. Let me explain. These fittings have a slight taper to them. This does 2 important things. It prevents the cement from being pushed back, and 2, it creates a good static seal between the pipe and fitting. As a consequence, the interference fit pushes the pipe out because of the outwards taper. So always hold them together for a few seconds before calling it done. Number 3 is using plumber's putty. Plumber's putty is an ancient way of sealing 2 mating surfaces together to get a leak-free joint. You typically see it under faucets, on bathtub strainers, and kitchen sinks. It would do the job, but it's not as reliable as a good quality silicone, for example. What happens with plumber's putty is that with time, it dries up, and if it's moved, the seal could break and you'd get a leak. Silicone, on the other hand, stays flexible with time, allowing for some movement without the compromise. A lot of old school plumbers will tell you that silicone isn't made for this, and they're not wrong, but it just works better. Number 4 is using Teflon tape as a sealer. I made a complete video on Teflon or PTFE tape, and I urge you to watch it to better understand what it's meant to be used for. Briefly, Teflon aids in getting proper penetration for tapered threads. Straight or parallel threads such as hoses, supply lines, and compression fittings do not need Teflon tape as they rely on a rubber gasket or compression not to leak, so it's totally unnecessary to use the tape on these types of fittings. I also have a complete guide on different types of threads, so I'll leave the link in the description box below. Talking about compression fittings, number 5 is not installing a brass insert as seen here. These brass inserts aren't necessary when using copper piping, but for plastic piping, they're an absolute must as a compression fittings do as they say. They compress onto the pipe to be watertight. If these inserts aren't installed, the plastic pipe would just collapse as it's being tightened and not seal, which is why it's crucial to install one. You'd normally see these fittings used for water filtering systems and refrigerator feed lines. The 6th problem I often encounter is when a beginner is trying to solder a joint. There's a lot of things that could go wrong when soldering, but one thing that many newbies ignore is using a low heat on their torch. A plumbing torch is meant to be used on medium to high strength. If you use it on a low setting, the tip of the torch will overheat, weaken, and eventually make it easier to deform, which would give you a poor performing flame. So always set it between medium and high for this not to happen. Number 7 is not turning off the power when emptying a hot water tank before swapping it out. Whether it's to replace an element, to flush out any sediment in the tank, or to replace the tank itself, the power must absolutely be turned off before emptying it. If it's not emptied before, one of the elements will overheat and blow, so always close the breaker before emptying a hot water tank. The 8th mistake is when soldering valves. Depending on the manufacturer, some valves are recommended to be soldered in the opened, closed, or half-closed position, and a lot of people don't know about this. Some particular brands, if soldered in the open position, could distort the Teflon seat, which would result in a leaking valve, and some in the closed position would blow out the same seats. So always check the tag and follow each manufacturer's directions for best results. Number 9 is not chamfering or reaming drain pipes. Normally, you deburr copper pipes to prevent turbulence and flow loss, but drain pipes also need to be reamed. Let me explain. If you were to cut a pipe with a saw and just leave the shavings there, waste would eventually catch on and possibly block the pipe, leading to an overflow. So always remove any burrs from your cuts. It only takes 5 seconds and it could save you a ton of money. And number 10 is cementing PVC to ABS with normal cement. PVC and ABS are two completely different materials. They both use different cements and they cannot be joined together with these cements. Instead, there is a special cement called transition glue which is able to melt both materials for them to properly fuse together. And a lot of people don't know about this, and it's very important to know before connecting them together, or it might just leak. And lastly, make sure you check your municipal code before using transition cement, as most times, only one transition joint is allowed in a building. And that's it. I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more videos like this one. And until the next one, thanks for watching.